After the cinematic disaster that shall not be named, I wanted this movie to happen just like everybody else because, yeah, Snyder should get his vision out. Even though I'm not that big on BVS, I still was anticipating this because there's no way it can't be amazing, right? Well, I finally watched all 4 hours of it, and I can safely say I absolutely loved it, but we should get into the negatives because this movie is not perfect. Don't worry, this won't be too long. Considering this only has a $70 million budget and considering it's 4 hours long, yeah, it's not gonna look the best. I take special effects very seriously, and as it goes along, it just gets worse and looks even more jarring. It didn't stop me from loving the movie at all, but it really just doesn't look good in the slightest of ways. But it still looks better than the film that shall not be named. The next issue was a lot more of their fault, which was the stupid dream sequence with Batman that literally added nothing to the movie. It was just an excuse to tease Heath Ledger's Joker in the movie, and then he somehow ends up in this movie less than he is in Suicide Squad, which he was supposed to be teased, and everyone was excited, and look what happened. This also similarly happens with Martian Manhunter. He shows up for like 2 scenes and then disappears until the epilogue. Regardless whether you believe me or not, these are small issues, and it did practically everything else right. So let's talk about that. I know in almost every video essay, the first positive I start with is the filmmaking, but I don't care. Whether you like Snyder's work or not, can we at least all acknowledge he's a master at visuals? And from what I've seen, this is definitely his best work visually. The color grading is perfect, from when it changes to a dark color palette, from when it changes to a bright, kind of comic booky-like color palette, it's perfect. There are even times when the camera moves from location to location, with cuts and just these long takes that I found so mesmerizing. Other times when it looks gorgeous is during flashes scenes when he runs. The sort of blue color looks so perfect, and just all the color in these scenes in general is a joy to look at. The filmmaking is also phenomenal during the action scenes, where we can tell Snyder is shoving as much into the screen as he can with a 4:3 aspect ratio. He gets as much into the camera and it looks beautiful. From when Batman has a tank taking out parademons to Steppenwolf and Superman duking it out, it's so entertaining to watch, and you can tell time was put into it. It also kind of looks like a comic book spectacle-wise, and it's shockingly perfect. Snyder took his time to make this movie so beautiful, and it shows. Wow, this was a major improvement over whatever it was in the fan film. The soundtrack pretty much is perfect in almost every scene. Wonder Woman basically has her own theme, and I love it. It's so thematic and powerful. But the soundtrack can also be soft, like when we see Barry Allen saving this lady from a car crash. It's such a small and subtle moment. Or the scene where Aquaman is about to dive into the sea and they play a practically perfect song that couldn't have been worked with in any other song. When it needs to be emotional, it's emotional. When it needs to be an awesome moment, they make it one with the soundtrack. Every scene shows the tone of what it's trying to do so perfectly through the soundtrack, as well as what it's trying to convey through the scene is what we see visually. Another example of this is when they play rock music, when the Justice League are gearing up because Snyder understands how this is awesome to the audience. We finally get to see these characters together, but done properly. It just feels like they spent so much time into selecting music and composing the music. It feels like they understand completely that music can make a scene great or awful, because it feels like that everyone that made this movie understands the artistry of film, and that is something special. Wow, there's a ton to talk about. Considering this is a 4-hour movie, you would expect them to be given some sort of depth and arc, and these characters do have that. To start off, I think I will begin with Flash, who is so much better. To be honest, I thought Ezra Miller was really good as the Flash in this movie. He really played the role well, in my opinion. Barry Allen in this film is a character that constantly screws up and doesn't really help the team in any way, until he finally makes things right by going back in time and ends up saving the universe completely, by redeeming his mistakes, by becoming the hero he wanted to be. The next one is Cyborg, probably the least known character out of the league. So you would expect him to have little to no development, but he does have an arc, and it's a phenomenal one. He goes from hating what he is and ends up becoming accepting and wanting to be what he is. He realizes his gifts and decides to live his life that way. He's also played really well by Ray Fisher. You can really buy his anger and sadness throughout the film, and then you buy his acceptance just as much at the ending of the movie. Even Aquaman has somewhat of a character arc. Aquaman! We see him as someone who turns his back on both worlds, the world under the sea and the world above. But then we see him redeem himself after all of these years of rejecting both worlds by killing Steppenwolf. Since we have seen the other three in BVS, it's clear Snyder wanted to focus more on the newly introduced characters than the ones we already know about. But what about Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman? Do they get any character? While not as much as the other three, they did get a good amount of character, but it was mostly from Batman. While BVS was the aftermath of Man of Steel, Snyder's Justice League is the aftermath of BVS, as we see Bruce's grief for Superman, as he feels he has to be the one to bring this team together, as he feels these heroes are the only ones that can stop Darkseid. Ben Affleck once again is phenomenal as Batman. He just really knows how to play this type of character that feels the weight of the world is on his shoulders, that feels it's up to him to bring this team of people together. Not as compelling as the last three, but there is definitely a layer of depth to Batman's character. Wonder Woman and Superman aren't really that deep in this movie, but I don't think they were really supposed to be focused on, and I thought the performances were still good enough. But also, Superman's death does affect a good amount of the film, so there's also that. Steppenwolf also shockingly has a bit of depth. He is trying to redeem himself after betraying Darkseid. Even though he is far from an insanely very layered villain, there still is enough depth there for you to care at all. Even Lois has a purpose to be here, and it's executed pretty well. It shows how Superman's loss affected her, how she can't move on because of the connection she grew with Clark. Snyder really took his time to make us care about these characters, to make sure they had arcs, and that we were able to connect with them. And he did it very well and made a phenomenal movie. And, in my opinion, made one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. Well, everyone, that's my Snyder Cut essay. So if you want to go check out my other content that I have on this channel, you can go to my YouTube About page if you want to check out some stuff on there, let's say. Or like if you want to check out my Letterboxd, my Discord server, my Instagram, that's all on my About page. Or maybe it'll be in the link in the description. Just check there just to be sure, I guess. And yeah, am I doing a DC ranking? I don't know. I'd have to buy Wonder Woman 84 for like $20. I don't know if I want to do that. I haven't watched it yet. Maybe I'll do a DCU ranking. It probably won't be including Justice League if I do end up doing one. But that's going to be the video, you guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.